Rain fell in a soft, steady drizzle on the faded neon signs of the small street, where cars still weaved through the night, leaving streaks of water reflecting blurry lights on the patchy pavement. Ethan Cole leaned against the corner wall of George's table, the brim of his baseball cap pulled low, hiding most of his face, his hand holding a paper tray with a serving of hot fried chicken he had just bought from the restaurant that bore his grandmother's name, the very place she had built years ago. The smell of fried chicken rose in the air, a scent that had been tied to Ethan's childhood, reminding him of those evenings sitting next to the wood stove, hearing his grandmother's quiet chuckle as she lifted each piece of chicken from the bubbling oil, sprinkling that secret family spice only they knew. That taste had once been a source of pride, something that made Ethan believe that just one bite could warm up even the worst day. But tonight, that taste felt foreign. The oil still sizzled, the faint, spicy scent was still there, but when Ethan took a bite, his throat tightened. The chicken was dry, the crispy coating hollow, missing something so important it made him want to spit it out. He gently placed the piece of chicken back onto the tray, a flicker of doubt in his eyes as he scanned the scratched-up tables, the faded plastic chairs, the yellowed stains on the walls, and the ceiling fan creaking above. Everything was familiar, yet strangely alien, as if he was standing inside a cheap replica of a memory, where the warmth that once was had become nothing but a hollow shell. At that moment, from the serving area in the back, rushed whispers broke through the air. "If anyone finds out about this, we're screwed. Who's gonna know the owner's not here? I already took the 20 grand. Ethan didn't turn around, but his hand crushed the napkin he was holding, the knuckles on his fingers turning white. His heart pounded, breath heavy in his chest. Those whispers fell into his ears like sharp blades, carving a deep, unspoken pain into his heart. 20 grand. For what Ethan wondered, his eyes drifting toward the kitchen, where dim yellow lights glowed, where hands were flipping chicken, scooping fries, and pouring sodas for customers. The place his grandmother once called the heart of the home. Now, that heart was rotting, eaten away by lies he had yet to uncover. He stood up and stepped out of the restaurant, cold wind brushing against his face as the glass door shut behind him. Darkness surrounded him, raindrops lightly falling onto his jacket. Ethan didn't head for the black car waiting across the street. Instead, he crossed the road, heading toward an old motel, where flickering neon lights struggled to stay lit. The sign cracked, and the smell of dampness rose from the concrete steps. He opened the door to his motel room without turning on the lights, letting the familiar scent of bleach and mildew fill his nose. Ethan placed the tray of chicken on the table, pulled out his phone, and replayed the recording he had secretly captured with the hidden button in his pocket. The voices trembled, full of calculation. 20 grand already. Who's gonna know? He saved the recording, eyes fixed on the blinking digits of the digital clock that read 11:47 p.m., quietly jotting the time down in his notebook. His hand touched an old leather wallet, pulling out a photo of his grandmother with her gentle smile, bright eyes behind her reading glasses, holding a wooden spoon next to that black cast-iron pot. You must remember, Ethan, Every piece of chicken is more than just food. It's trust. It's a promise. It's a message. You are worthy of being loved. Ethan closed his eyes, taking a deep breath before opening them again, a determination sharper than ever in his gaze. He knew that tonight he would no longer sleep peacefully, because from this moment on, Ethan understood what he had to do. Tomorrow, he would return to the restaurant, not as the owner, but as a night shift dishwasher under the fake name Luke Harris, with only one mission: to reclaim the stolen dignity, to expose those who turned his family's dream into a lie, and to save the soul of the fried chicken restaurant his grandmother had left behind. And to do that, Ethan was ready to get his hands dirty, ready to embrace the pain, ready to face the truth, even if that truth might break him, just to protect one promise: no one has the right to sell a soul just to keep an empty shell alive. The next morning, before dawn could paint the oil-streaked streets gold, Ethan put on an old flannel shirt with worn-out shoulders, heavy work boots, and pulled his cap low over his face. It was the same shirt he had worn when he worked as a line cook at 17, under the suffocating heat of the fryers, where he learned to cut chicken precisely, wash greasy pans until his hands were wrinkled and raw. He didn't bring a wallet, didn't carry a business card that read, "Owner of George's Table." He only brought an old phone set to secret record, a few pages of notes, and his grandmother's photo tucked deep in his shirt pocket. The back door of the restaurant creaked as he pushed it open, the smell of frying oil, spicy marinade, and raw chicken hitting him, hot and heavy. A short, heavy-set man with a badge reading Kevin. Shift manager glanced at him, eyes tired, indifferent. Dishwasher, right. What's your name? Luke Harris. Ethan replied, his voice hoarse, avoiding eye contact. Kevin shrugged, his voice curt. Shifts from 3 p.m. until close. Don't break anything. Clean up the kitchen. Nobody's got time to teach you. No welcoming smile. No small talk. Ethan walked toward the dishwashing area, where plastic bins overflowed with metal trays covered in batter, grease, and crumbs. The dishwasher hummed constantly, steam rising and mixing with the sizzling sounds from the fryers, creating that damp, heavy air that only cheap kitchens seem to have. He began scrubbing each tray, sponge in hand, eyes darting around the kitchen, the delivery corner, the walk-in freezer, the supply racks, the payroll sheet pinned to the wall. He saw Troy, the shift lead, moving quickly, clipboard in hand, eyes sweeping over everyone like a hawk watching its prey. Ethan didn't need to ask to know that Troy was the one controlling the inventory, the one who knew every shady transaction, Kevin's right-hand man. But what caught Ethan's attention most was Troy's eyes, cold, watchful, always scanning to see who might be watching him. And then Ethan saw her. Emily, a server around 24, brown hair tied back, apron stained with flour, hands moving fast as she stacked buns, wiped counters, and took drive-through orders. But what caught Ethan's attention wasn't her speed, it was her eyes. Those eyes always avoided contact, like she was afraid of being seen. Sometimes she flinched slightly when Troy walked by, or when Kevin shouted from the small back office, "Move faster." Emily. She would lower her head even more, her hands trembling slightly for a moment before continuing her work in a heavy silence. Ethan grabbed a new tray, still scrubbing, eyes flicking to the reflection on the stainless steel oven door. Emily was wrapping food, glancing around, then quickly slipping a small piece of paper into her apron pocket. She stuffed it in fast, turned away, and continued working, her thin shoulders trembling slightly. Troy's voice snapped through the air. "Rush order. Emily, focus on your job." Emily nodded slightly, not daring to respond. Ethan saw the small bruises on her wrists as she lifted trays, bruises that didn't come from small kitchen accidents, but were the marks of an invisible pressure weighing down on a young woman with no choices. Ethan gripped the towel in his hand tighter, sweat mixing with hot water dripping onto the back of his hand. But he didn't stop. He had seen too many good people exploited, threatened, and turned into tools for those far greedier than them. No one should have to stay silent just to keep a minimum wage job, Ethan told himself. The afternoon shift dragged on with the clanging of knives, the hiss of fryers, and the constant calls for orders. Every time Ethan moved through the kitchen, he watched boxes signed off by Troy with no labels, spice bags with faded logos, cardboard boxes hurriedly shoved into the walk-in. Kevin never checked, just signed, then disappeared back into the office, shutting the door with a click. And Emily, every time their eyes met, would only give a small nod before lowering her gaze again. The first day passed, and Ethan left the restaurant just before midnight, the smell of fried chicken grease still clinging to his hands, shoulders aching, his shirt stained with dishwater, cap pulled low over his face as he blended in with the tired workers leaving their night shifts. But in those slow steps, Ethan knew he had found the first glimmer of light, a young woman named Emily, someone who still cared about the truth, and perhaps she would be the crucial link to help him expose the crimes happening in the very place that had once been the dream of his childhood. The next day, Ethan returned to the restaurant just as the sun was setting, painting a golden hue across the fine dust clinging to the fogged-up windows. He walked through the back door, giving a slight nod to a young worker dragging out a trash bag, then quietly put on his gloves, tied his apron, and started his dishwashing shift. Everything seemed exactly the same as yesterday, but today, Ethan wasn't just washing dishes. He was watching. Troy still carried his clipboard, muttering endlessly about wrong orders, missing supplies, but his eyes kept darting toward the security cameras and then back to the delivery area. Kevin still sat in the small office, door ajar, flipping through his ledger, occasionally stepping out to bark a curt order before disappearing again. At 6:10 p.m., an old truck pulled up by the delivery door. Two large cardboard boxes with no labels, no QR codes, no supplier information were pushed through the back door by a man in a grey hoodie. Troy quickly signed a piece of paper, his eyes scanning the area, locking eyes with Ethan for just a second before he quickly walked away. Ethan lowered his head, continuing to scrub the baking trays, but his ears burned and his heart raced as he saw Troy push the two boxes into the walk-in freezer without anyone checking them. On the outside of the boxes, There were lines of text scratched out, logos pasted over, and in the lower corner he saw a faded letter, FB. He remembered the recording from the night before, 20 grand already. Who's gonna know? At 7:30 p.m. Troy stepped into the office where Kevin was sitting and closed the door behind him. Ethan pretended to take out the trash nearby, tilting his head slightly. The voices were low, but clear enough to hear. Tomorrow morning, I'll take care of the rest of the Firebird shipment. Don't let them catch on. You get it. Who cares, man? I got 3 guys needing money. Just do it right. Firebird. Firebird. Ethan repeated the name in his mind. That name had once been tied to a small supplier network that had been shut down years ago for ingredient fraud. And now, Firebird had returned, showing up in the storage room that still had his grandmother's photo hanging, alongside the words, "Quality is honor." Ethan took a deep breath, his hand shaking slightly as he tightened his grip on the trash bag and walked away. He knew that if he charged in now and demanded answers, he would lose everything, ruin the plan, and only make these people more cautious. He needed patience. He needed evidence. The shift ended just before midnight. Ethan stood in the corner near the delivery area, holding his old phone, pretending to check messages while secretly taking photos of the unmarked boxes sitting quietly in the freezer next to the branded marinated chicken boxes. Once done, he saved the photos in a folder named Dustpan and sent them to a secure email. That night, Ethan returned to the motel, the room still smelling of bleach and mildew, the metal bed frame creaking as he sat down, placing the phone on the table and staring at the screen. He opened the photo of his grandmother, her gentle smile, her bright yet resolute eyes. "Grandma, I won't let them steal your recipe. I won't let them tarnish our family's honor." At that moment, a message came in Maya. "Got the pictures? Firebird is back in business, possibly using your restaurant chain as a distribution hub. Stay safe. Await further instructions." Ethan closed his eyes, breathing slowly, feeling each heartbeat pounding in his chest. He knew those unmarked boxes weren't just a sign of sloppy management. They were the sign of a leaking network of stolen recipes and ingredients, quietly infiltrating the restaurant chain his grandmother had built, turning the fried chicken thighs that once held the taste of childhood for thousands of customers into cheap products for black market profit for a select few. Outside the window, it was still raining, the neon lights flickering on the motel sign, casting blinking streaks of light across Ethan's face. He stood up, pulled out a note, and wrote, "Firebird, Kevin, Troy, Emily." The question mark after Emily's name made his hand pause. Ethan remembered Emily's frightened eyes, the way her hands trembled while wrapping sandwiches, how she kept her gaze down every time Kevin walked by, the brief flash of defiance that quickly vanished. Was she involved? Or was she just someone being forced into silence? Ethan wondered. But deep down, he believed that Emily was the only bridge that could help him find the truth. Before turning off the light, Ethan opened his phone, replaying the Firebird recording 3 times, closing his eyes to etch it into his memory before whispering, "Tomorrow, I'll start finding the answers." The next morning, The sky was grey, thick clouds stretching over the city, signaling a long, heavy day. Ethan stepped through the back door of George's table, the dull yellow light of the kitchen reflecting off the dusty, mud-streaked boots he wore. No one looked up, no one greeted him, only the hiss of frying oil and the spicy scent of the marinade filling the air. He began his shift with trays covered in grease, his hands soaking in hot water until they turned red, each finger numb. But Ethan didn't feel the pain, because the pain in his heart was far greater than any blister on his hands. Near noon, he saw Emily standing by the drink station, her hands trembling slightly as she scooped ice into cups. A small piece of paper slipped from her apron pocket, sliding across the wet tiles and sticking to the edge of the dishwasher near Ethan's feet. He bent down, picked it up, and hid it in his palm. She didn't notice, or perhaps pretended not to, continuing her work with her head down. Ethan washed his hands, quietly stepping into the storage room, unfolding the piece of paper under the dim yellow light. It was a copy of an invoice with the words "Firebird, evening delivery, do not record." In the lower corner was the signature R. Fields, scribbled in a rushed hand. Ethan's heart pounded, sweat forming at his temples. He looked around, rolled up the piece of paper, and tucked it deep into the pocket near his grandmother's photo. A question echoed in his mind. Is Emily helping me in the afternoon? As the restaurant quieted, Ethan saw Emily wiping the counter, her eyes staring blankly out the window, her hands pausing for a moment when Troy walked by. Troy gave her a cold glance, a look that was a threat without words. Emily lowered her head, continuing to wipe the counter, her thin shoulders trembling. Ethan walked closer, lowering his voice. "You okay?" Emily gave a small nod, not looking at him. Her voice was barely a breath. "If you stay quiet, no one will bother you." Ethan looked directly into her eyes, seeing for the first time that she didn't look away. In those dark brown eyes was a storm that had been held back for far too long. "Sometimes staying quiet kills you faster than anything else," Ethan said softly before turning away, continuing to wipe trays, not waiting for her reply. That evening, Ethan left the restaurant late, stepping out into the back parking lot, the air still heavy with the scent of oil and dampness. He stood quietly in front of his car, watching the faint neon glow reflect on the windshield. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Maya knew info on Firebird. Stay safe. Don't act rashly. Ethan took a deep breath, pocketed the phone, and headed back to the motel. In the cramped room, he placed the paper Emily had dropped onto the table, took a photo, and sent it to Maya. He sat there, looking at the photo of his grandmother on his phone screen, her voice echoing in his memory. "Ethan, if you don't protect what's important, no one else will do it for you." He closed his eyes, listening to the raindrops tapping on the tin roof, mixing with the creak of the ceiling fan above. He knew Emily was scared, but she had kept that paper in her pocket, not destroying it, not hiding it away. That meant she was calling for help, in her quiet, hidden way. The next morning, Ethan arrived early, wiping tables, changing trash bags, washing his hands before stepping into the drink station, standing next to Emily. She avoided his gaze, her hands trembling as she snapped the lids on iced teacups. "Thanks for the paper," Ethan said softly. Emily froze, her shoulders stiffening. After a moment, she looked up, eyes red but gaze steady. "I can't let them take everything." "What have they taken from you already?" Ethan asked, his voice warm but firm. Emily was silent for a moment before whispering, "I used to believe this place was a family, but when I asked about those boxes, they cut my hours and threatened to fire me if I asked again." Ethan nodded slightly, placing his hand on the counter, his voice low. "I can't promise I'll protect you from everything, but I promise I won't let the truth be buried." Emily gripped her cup tightly, her hands still shaking. "I'm scared, but I'm tired of staying silent." A single tear fell onto the back of her hand, mixing with the flour stains from the chicken batter. That night, Ethan saw Emily walk past the dishwashing area, quietly dropping a small USB wrapped in a plastic bag into the trash bin by his feet before walking away without a word. Ethan picked up the USB, his heart pounding. He knew this moment would change everything. That night, in the motel room, Ethan plugged the USB into his old laptop, files from the security cameras flickering to live footage of Troy receiving deliveries, Kevin taking cash, the Firebird boxes being pushed into storage. Everything was clear. On the screen, there was Emily, standing in the corner, looking directly at the camera, her eyes teary but determined, as if sending a message. "I've done my part. Now it's your turn." Ethan looked into those eyes, his chest tightening. He took a deep breath, saved all the data, and sent a copy to Maya with a message. "We have the evidence." He looked up at the ceiling, listening to the rain, his eyes reflecting a spark of resolve. Tomorrow, there will be no more silence. The next morning, Ethan left the motel before sunrise, dew still clinging to the sidewalks, his hair damp and cold, his heavy boots stepping through puddles left behind by the rain from the night before. He didn't stop to buy coffee like he usually did, didn't turn the corner where the waffle truck's sweet aroma always lingered, but walked straight toward George's table, carrying within him a quiet, burning resolve. Today, the truth will no longer be hidden. He stepped in through the back door, the dim yellow light casting shadows across his gaunt face, his eyes dark with exhaustion but burning with a terrifying clarity. Kevin was still in the office. Troy paced back and forth with his clipboard, muttering about orders, while Emily stood at the drink station, fidgeting with her iced teacup, her eyes glancing nervously at Ethan, a flicker of worry in her gaze. Ethan nodded at Emily, his eyes steady, as if saying, "We're ready." Around 5 p.m., a strange truck appeared once again at the delivery door. Ethan was washing trays, eyes catching the scene through the crack of the door. Troy was waiting, holding a wad of cash, clipboard tucked under his arm, speaking quietly with the driver wearing a dark hoodie. Kevin stepped out of the office, a cigarette in hand, eyes quickly scanning the area before pausing on the camera above. But that camera had long stopped working, only blinking a fake red light. Kevin turned away, saying nothing. Ethan wiped his hands and stepped into the storage area, pretending to check the trash. but his eyes recorded every detail, unmarked boxes being pushed inside, red tape with the FB, Firebird symbol on the corner. The driver pushed the boxes in quickly, no signatures, no invoices, then left just as fast. Troy let out a snort, tapping Kevin on the shoulder. Easy money. Huh, Kevin smirked. As long as we keep our mouths shut, we'll be just fine. Those words cut into Ethan like a knife, but he didn't show it, only lowered his head and returned to the dish area, gripping the towel so tightly that blood rushed to the back of his hand, his eyes flashing with a determined fire. Enough. That night, Ethan and Emily stood next to each other at the drink station, neither of them saying a word. The crackle of frying oil, the sharp scent of spices in the air. But they both stood still, listening to the pounding in their chests. Emily spoke softly, her voice trembling but firm. Tonight, they're going to move those boxes. I heard Kevin talking to Troy. Ethan nodded, his eyes resolute. You've done enough. The rest is on me. She lowered her head, hands tightening around her cup, her shoulders trembling slightly. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, light but steady. Don't be afraid. We don't have to be silent anymore. Emily looked up, eyes red but glinting with a rare light. She nodded and stepped back, blending in with the others, cleaning up before closing. When the clock struck 9 p.m., Ethan pretended to take out the trash, but instead stepped into the back lot. His old phone already switched to video mode. The hidden camera Maya had set up inside the fake trash can in the corner, already rolling. He stood in the shadows, breathing slowly, ears straining for every sound. Another truck pulled up, headlights shutting off the moment it stopped. Kevin and Troy stepped out the back door, each carrying a box, eyes darting around. The driver got out, opened the trunk, revealing it filled with the same unmarked Firebird boxes. Kevin's voice, soft but clear in the night. Hurry up. Once this is done tonight, we've got another shipment tomorrow. Troy snorted. Easiest money is when the dumb owner has no idea. Ethan clenched his fists, watching through the crack of the trash can, anger flashing in his eyes, but held back by focus. The driver handed Troy a wad of cash, which Troy quickly stuffed into his inside pocket. Kevin stood nearby, lighting a cigarette, blowing out a plume of smoke with a smirk. I used to think this place was family. But what family pays you on time? Huh. Ethan pressed the record button on his phone, capturing everything: Kevin's voice, Troy's face, the Firebird boxes, every detail, every second. He knew this was the moment that would serve as irrefutable evidence, exposing the filthy truth rotting the kitchen that still bore his grandmother's name. As the truck drove off, Ethan stood silently in the dark, his heart pounding, but his eyes clear and calm. He looked up at the cloud-heavy night sky, whispering under his breath, "Grandma, I'm about to get it all back." He turned back toward the restaurant, seeing Emily wiping the counter. She looked up, her eyes questioning, worried. Ethan nodded, offering a faint smile, the first in what felt like forever. We're almost there. Early the next morning, Ethan stood alone in the still dark kitchen, the dim yellow light reflecting off the grease-speckled tiles that hadn't been cleaned yet. He stood there, taking a deep breath, his hand resting on the cold stainless steel table, inhaling the sharp scent of spices mixed with the burnt plastic smell of the old fryer. In his mind, the images from last night replayed Kevin taking the cash, Troy carrying the Firebird boxes, the words, "Easiest money is when the dumb owner has no idea," ringing like a punch, digging up the pain Ethan had buried deep within himself all the months he had stepped away from this kitchen, entrusting it to people he once believed in. "Not dumb anymore," Ethan whispered. He pulled out his phone, replaying the video, watching Kevin's smirk, Troy stuffing the money into his pocket, the unmarked boxes exchanged in the darkness. Each time he watched, Ethan's heart clenched, his hands shaking slightly with anger, but his eyes stayed bright, calm. As the restaurant opened, Ethan saw Emily walk in, her face pale from lack of sleep, eyes puffy but filled with determination. She passed by Ethan, placing her backpack down, looking at him with a small nod, her lips moving silently. "Today," Ethan nodded, their eyes meeting, a quiet understanding stronger than any spoken promise. At noon, the restaurant was busy, Troy shouting into the kitchen for more fried chicken, biscuits, and fries, his voice raspy with irritation over slow orders. Kevin paced around, checking the cash in the register, glancing at the camera above before turning away, unaware that every move he made had been recorded by the hidden camera inside the pantry corner since yesterday. Ethan washed trays while watching, sometimes pretending to mop so he could move closer to the delivery area, memorizing the placement of the Firebird boxes in the freezer, next to the branded spice boxes, noting the differences in color and packaging. When the crowd thinned, Ethan stepped outside, calling Maya quickly. "Tonight, they're moving the boxes at closing." Maya replied briefly, "We're ready." Ethan hung up, looking out at the grey clouds outside the dusty, oil-streaked window, a cold raindrop landing on his arm through the cracked frame, sharpening his focus. As the shift ended, Ethan stood alone in the freezer, his hand resting on a Firebird spice box, eyes closing. Images of his grandmother with her wooden spoon over the sizzling chicken pot filled his mind, her voice echoing Ethan. "The recipe is only part of it. The rest is honor. If you don't protect it, everything will be lost." He opened his eyes, his gaze unwavering. "I lost it once, Grandma, but I won't lose it again." That night, as the restaurant closed, Ethan wiped counters and washed trays, acting as if it were a normal day, but every sense in him was on high alert. Emily stood at the drink station, wiping down each steel tray carefully, glancing at Ethan occasionally, her eyes flashing with worry. Troy walked by, tapping the counter. "Hurry it up. Emily, don't waste our time." Emily nodded silently, but when Troy turned his back, she looked at Ethan, her eyes saying everything. "Don't let them get away with this." Kevin appeared, clipboard in hand, tossing it onto the counter, his voice sharp. "Me and Troy got things to take care of. You people clean up and go." Ethan gripped the spray bottle tightly, eyes on Kevin as he walked away, the fear in his eyes gone, replaced only with resolve. At 11 p.m., Ethan saw Maya and two men in protective vests enter through the back. exchanging silent nods. Maya whispered, "Tonight it ends." Ethan took a deep breath, placing a hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing. He looked around the kitchen where he had grown up, where he learned to wash trays, marinate chicken with his grandmother's recipe, dreaming of making it a place where everyone felt safe. Tonight, we take back its soul. He turned to Emily, who was wiping down the last tray, her eyes red, lips pressed together, hands trembling but not stopping. Ethan nodded to her, smiling. "You've done your part. Now it's my turn." That night, wind swept through the back lot of the restaurant, carrying the scent of grease and the chill of leftover rain. Inside George's table, the dim yellow lights glinted off the freshly cleaned steel counters, reflecting Ethan's tense face as he stood alone in the kitchen, phone in hand, checking the video one last time. Emily stood at the drink station, her hands trembling slightly as she wrapped the last orders for the late drive-through customers. Each time her eyes flicked to Ethan, she clutched the towel tighter, lips pressed, her eyes flashing a mix of fear and determination. Ethan stepped closer, his voice deep but warm. "You okay?" Emily nodded, whispering, "I'm ready." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes firm. "Just stay put. Let me handle the rest." Near midnight, Kevin and Troy appeared in the freezer, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the kitchen. Troy whistled, signaling to Brad, a young worker taking out the trash, to shut the kitchen door. "Clean up fast and get out. Don't waste our time," Kevin snapped. Brad shrugged, leaving, and the space fell silent except for the hum of the fan and the faint crackle of the cooling fryers. Outside, the familiar truck pulled into the lot, headlights cutting off, two dark hooded figures stepping out, opening the trunk to reveal unmarked Firebird boxes with red tape. Ethan stood behind the freezer door, gripping the phone set to live stream, sending footage directly to Maya, waiting outside in the car with the inspection team. He heard Troy's voice drifting out, snorting with a cold laugh. "Hurry up. We're clearing this batch tonight. There's another shipment coming tomorrow." Kevin shoved a wad of cash into his jacket pocket, glancing around. "These clueless employees don't know a damn thing, and that old fossil of an owner, he's never coming back." Ethan took a deep breath, pushed the freezer door open with a sharp creak, and stepped out. Kevin and Troy spun around, shock flashing across their faces. "What the hell are you doing here, Luke?" Kevin barked, his voice harsh. Ethan didn't answer. He walked forward, pulling off the worn-out baseball cap from his head, revealing his thin but determined face, his voice ringing out, low and clear, each word sharp. The entire freezer fell silent, the only sound the low hum of the fan. "I am Ethan Cole, the owner of George's Table, and I know exactly what you've been doing." Kevin's face drained of color, his hand clutching the wad of cash tighter, eyes darting around for an escape. Troy stammered, "You're talking nonsense." Ethan raised his phone, pressing play in the heavy silence. Kevin's voice spilling out, clear as day. "Easy money, huh? As long as we keep our mouths shut, we'll be fine. These clueless employees don't know a damn thing, and that old fossil of an owner, he's never coming back." The sound echoed through the kitchen, cutting through the layers of grease on the walls, tearing apart every lie they had smugly hidden. Emily stood at the kitchen door, eyes wide, a hand over her mouth as the confessions played. Her tears fell, not from fear, but because the truth was finally out in the open. She stepped forward, her voice shaking but clear. "I saw them. I kept the evidence. I don't want to see this place sold out for one more day." Kevin roared, "You little what the hell do you know?" Ethan cut in, his eyes locking on Kevin, voice steady. "She knows the truth, and she has the courage not to turn away." The back door swung open, and Maya stepped in with two plainclothes investigators, badges for supply chain inspections and federal warrants in hand. Maya looked at Kevin, Troy, then at Ethan, nodding. "It ends tonight." Kevin stepped back, face pale, Troy's eyes darting, hands trembling as he searched for a way out. Ethan turned to the workers standing huddled in the corner. People who had silently endured day after day. "I didn't step away so this place could become a cash grab for thieves. This is our home, and starting today, we take it back." Emily wiped her tears, nodding, her eyes shining with belief. Maya placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, speaking softly. "Well done. You saved this place." Ethan exhaled, and for the first time in years, the kitchen felt like home again, no longer heavy with fear, no longer filled with whispers in the dark. Only the truth remained. The freezer door slammed shut as Kevin stumbled backward, sweat beading on his forehead, his hand clutching the cash that had now become undeniable evidence. Troy stood frozen, eyes darting, but Maya signaled for the investigators to block the exits. There was nowhere left to run. Maya opened her tablet, replaying the hidden camera footage Kevin and Troy taking cash, moving unmarked Firebird boxes. Kevin's voice ringing out in the dead silence of the kitchen. "These clueless employees don't know a damn thing. And that old fossil of an owner, he's never coming back." Emily stood beside Ethan, hands clenched, eyes red but firm, no longer avoiding the truth as she once had. She had chosen to stand for what was right. Ethan looked at Kevin, his voice calm but final. "You were right about one thing. Kevin, I didn't come back sooner, and I trusted the wrong people." Kevin shouted, his voice cracking with anger. "I've been making this place a profit every month. What more do you want?" Ethan's eyes sharpened as he stepped forward. "I want respect. I want honor. And I will not allow my grandmother's legacy or the hard work of the people here to be turned into dirty profit for greedy men." Maya nodded, and the investigators stepped forward, demanding Kevin hand over the cash. Kevin resisted, pulling back, but they held him fast. Troy trembled, backing away, stammering, "I was just following orders. I didn't know anything." Ethan's gaze turned cold. "You knew, and you chose money over honor." He turned to Maya, nodding. "Fire them immediately. Ban them from ever stepping foot in any George's Table location again." Kevin thrashed, yelling, "You'll regret this. This place will fall without me." Ethan didn't respond, turning his back, eyes steady, unshaken. Troy ripped off his apron, eyes burning with hate, and together with Kevin was escorted out, leaving behind a heavy silence. A kitchen filled only with the cold scent of cooling oil, dirty footprints, and a future being decided in this moment. Ethan turned to look at Emily and the remaining staff, standing near the prep area, their eyes a mix of fear, worry, but also a flicker of hope. They had heard everything, witnessed everything. Ethan spoke, his voice soft but ringing through the kitchen. "I owe all of you an apology. I let this place fall into the hands of the wrong people. But starting today, we rebuild." He bent down, picking up the apron Troy had thrown, dusting it off, hanging it neatly back on the hook. "Anyone who stays, I will protect you. Anyone who leaves, I understand. But those who stay, we will honor what this place was meant to be: family, quality, and respect." Emily stepped forward, eyes glistening, her voice hoarse. "I'm not going anywhere." Another worker, Brad, once threatened by Troy for asking about his hours, stepped forward, voice shaking. I'm staying too." Ethan smiled, nodding, rolling up his sleeves. "Then let's start cleaning up. We're dumping every last bit of Firebird seasoning. Tomorrow, we start fresh." Together, he and Emily opened the freezer, carrying out the Firebird boxes to the dumpster, slicing them open, dumping them, letting the fake spices dissolve into the moisture, their sharp, artificial scent finally fading. Emily watched the boxes fall, eyes red, voice trembling. This should have happened a long time ago. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. Better late than never. As the last box was tossed into the garbage truck, Ethan looked up at the night sky, now clear of clouds, stars scattered, faint but bright. He turned to look at the small restaurant, the warm glow of light spilling from the windows, the place where he once learned to wash trays beside his grandmother. From now on, this place will belong to those who speak the truth and do what's right. Emily stood beside him, nodding, smiling for the first time after many nights of fear. The next morning, George's table welcomed the sunrise through the front windows, dust particles hanging in the light, sparkling as if announcing a true new beginning. Ethan arrived early, walking in through the front door instead of the back like he had during the undercover days. He carried a clipboard, papers detailing orders from verified suppliers, a payroll check sheet, and a new pledge. There is no room for fraud in this kitchen. Emily was already there, wiping down the counter, eyes still shadowed with fatigue but shining with resolve. When she saw Ethan, she looked up, a small, fearless smile crossing her face. "Morning, boss," Emily said, her voice hoarse but firm. Ethan smiled. "No need to call me boss, Emily. Just call me Ethan." Brad walked in, mop bucket in hand, nodding at Ethan. Linda, an older worker, placed a basket of fresh rolls on the shelf, saying softly, "I was going to quit, but I want to see this place return to what it was meant to be." Ethan looked at them, taking a deep breath, eyes steady and warm. "Today, we begin again. No slogans, no noise, just doing what's right." The fryers began to hiss, the familiar scent of spicy fried chicken mixing with the warm smell of freshly baked biscuits, drifting through the restaurant. Emily stood at the station, gloved up, marinating chicken by hand. using the exact spice blend Ethan's grandmother had once taught him. She smiled as the scent rose, not the cheap, artificial smell of knockoff spices, but the aroma of memories and pride. Customers began to line up, not for discounts or ads, but because they had heard the restaurant was changing. Those who had once left came back, tasting the food, smiling as they chewed. Ethan stood behind the counter, watching, a weight lifting off his shoulders. He saw Linda chatting with old customers, Brad cleaning tables cheerfully, and Emily looking out from the kitchen, her eyes shining with pride as customers nodded in satisfaction after their first bites. When the lunch rush was over, Ethan called Emily over, handing her a new badge that read, Shift Leader, Emily. She looked at it, tears brimming. I don't know if I deserve this. Ethan smiled. You saved this place, not just with evidence, but with your courage to stand for the truth. Emily clutched the badge, tears falling, but a smile breaking through. I promise, I won't let anyone ruin this place again. That afternoon, Ethan stood alone in the kitchen as the sun set, casting light through the small window by the fryer. He pulled out his grandmother's old photo, placing it on the spice rack, his eyes misty but joyful. Grandma, I kept my promise. On the counter, the last batch of chicken was marinated the old way, the warm, spicy scent filling the kitchen, just like the nights when young Ethan stood by his grandmother, watching her sprinkle the seasoning with flour-dusted, gentle hands. The next morning, with dawn shining through the glass, George's table was no longer a dying, silent place, but alive with a new spirit. Ethan walked into the kitchen, breathing in the scents of real spices, fresh biscuits, and hot coffee. You said food is about making others feel valued. I understand that now, deeper than ever. I promise to continue, for George's table, for you, for everyone who believes kindness deserves to exist. He placed the book back in the drawer, hands trembling slightly, but his heart calm. Before leaving, Ethan turned to look at the kitchen, the ceiling fan quietly spinning, the fridge humming, the scent of fried chicken still in the air. He looked up at his grandmother's photo, smiling, whispering, "The flame you lit, I won't let it die." He stepped out, closing the glass door, the neon sign above still glowing, not brightly, but warmly, steadily. Outside, the street was quiet, but in Ethan's heart, he knew George's table was ready for a new journey, a journey for those who chose kindness, who preserved the true taste, and who would turn this small restaurant into a place where everyone felt welcome and valued.